Hi everyone, hope everyone is well. This evening I am playing New York 1776. I've recently had a massive splurge, I guess you could say, on reading more about the American War of Independence or American War Revolution, and reading quite a few different books on the subject matter, thinking about painting some minis. And for that historical period, and I thought, I should get some of my games off the shelf and go through them and play them again. And so this evening, I literally almost randomly picked New York 1776. It is a block game. It's from Worthington. Now, this is the first edition. So the map is a card map. I've got it under plexi, so there's a little bit of light reflecting. And the map in the shot here, the map is actually about double this size. It's quite a thin map, but much longer. So this is about half of it. And I'm sort of getting ready to play. I'm playing the game solo. I know some people don't like playing block games solo. Doesn't bother me. I've been playing war games long enough to sort of figure out the way that I like to play block games solo. Basically, in the setup, we've got Washington and a considerable size of forces in New York. We've got off camera, you can't see, and as I play through the game, I'll move the camera about. I've got some American forces, continental forces, on Fort Lee. Got some other forces here in which I think I'm not supposed to do, in Brooklyn. I think under the rules, I'm not entirely sure I can do that. I will double check. I'm just reading. Oh, it's okay apart from Staten Island. Okay, cool. So that's fine. And the British, they've got their naval fleet here, and their ground forces over in Staten Island. I've not put all the blocks on the British officers. As I move them across the board, I'll put the blocks on them because I'm playing the game solo. And I'll also caveat this and say I'm playing the game this evening a bit of a what-if sort of scenario. I'm not playing it with any great strategy in mind. I'm not trying to, formulate the perfect strategy in this game. I know some people do, and that's great, but that's not how I'm playing it this evening. Playing for a bit of a what if, just playing for the enjoyment of moving some wooden blocks around the board and rolling some dice. There are 20 turns to this game. I've played this game quite a few times now. It's very rare that, from memory, I'm not entirely sure how many times I've ever got to the last turn. What I'll probably do is do a few turns and then give us some summary of how the game is shaping up. But as I said, I'm playing it solo. How I'll do that, I will move the blocks in these sort of formations. You can't really play block games in the purest sense. So, well, you can, because you can have the blocks upside down. That's not how I do it. I'm playing for that again. Like I said, I'm playing for a bit of fun. And the enjoyment of playing a game in the American War of Independence in this manner. I think it doesn't take long to play this game. It's a bit over an hour, something like that. And I have to say, it's been a while since I've played this, and as soon as I set it all out and put the blocks, like a lot of war gamers, I do like wooden blocks. I love cardboard chits and hexes, of course, are doing this. 90% of war games I play are like that, but occasionally it's just fun just to get a block game out and, like I said, move some blocks and roll some dice. So yeah, looking forward to getting stuck into this. We're into the game for the couple of turns now. The British have been able to move across the water at the New York harbour and get their ground forces starting to get into formation to make good on an attack on Brooklyn here, which is a fortified defensive position. The Continental Army have moved some troops over from New York over to Brooklyn in anticipation of an attack. The Continental Army also, by placing some of their troops in key positions, have been able to stop the British sailing their ships down both this side and through there as well. So at the minute the Continental Army is sort of controlling, but next turn the British will make an attack on Brooklyn here. Now I'm deliberately leaving a door open for the Continental Army to escape if the British attack is successful. The British, I'm sure, could have closed that door, but I'm going to leave it open because for a wargaming evening it's going to make it more thematic to do so. And this is one of the joys of playing solo. I'm almost sort of role-playing out this scenario, this situation in my head, playing it on the tabletop here. So next turn I think we'll do a battle and we'll see how that shakes down, see how that works out. So no great surprise really. The British have been able to take Brooklyn. There's a fierce battle between the British forces and the Continentals. The Continentals didn't give it up easy though, and they definitely inflicted some casualties on some of the British forces, but wisely decided to retreat and let the British take Brooklyn. So we've moved the Continentals away from the British here. The Washington and his forces still hold New York. Just to the slightly to the this side, there's also green and some Continental forces here as well. Plus I placed a couple of forces on the White Plains, which is right, you can't see it, but right over here. So as the British move across the board, I'll move the camera accordingly. And this now gives the British opportunity to move some of their tall ships into this zone here and control that piece of water. They cannot move into Zone A as the Continental Army have both New York and the Hook here. And yeah, do a couple more turns. The battle actually in the game uses a battle map front, middle, left, middle, and right columns. Actually, doesn't take long to roll the dice and do the battle, so it's quite enjoyable. And I just decided to, as soon as the Continental did the first sort of turn of the battle, I could have kept them in a bit longer, maybe, because the actual casualties were about 50-50. But playing this evening, I wanted to pull the Continental out and have a bit of a cat and mouse chase across the board as the British were trying to engage them into various combats. And it'd be interesting to see at the end of the game if that was a good idea or not. That was an interesting turn. The British, flush with their success at Brooklyn, had a crack at Washington and New York, but because they were fighting across the water and the Patriots were in a defended position, they were able to hold them off extremely well due to some very good die rolling. The British had some serious casualties inflicted, so they retreated. Although they retreated back across the water, the Continental Army were unable to sort of inflict any more casualties on their retreat, but still been able to hold on to New York here. So yeah, it's quite an eventful battle. And things are looking good for the Continental Army, certainly. The British are going to be trying to chase them across the board there and inflict those casualties, see if they can get to New York. In the last few turns, the British have been able to push the Patriots out of the defensive position that they had here at Fort Washington. And so enraged were they, I suppose, at the result of trying to take New York across the water. They then diverted their attention to Lee and his forces. Now Lee and the American forces, the Patriot forces, have then now moved across the board here. They are making their way to the White Plains, where they have a couple of reinforcements. The British are also now turning their attention to these forces here at Fort Lee, and of course they're holding Washington at bay with these forces here, Howe and his forces here. I did toy with the idea of the Americans coming out and attacking Howe and his forces here, but I felt like thematically maybe makes sense for Washington just to hold up in New York, even though he knows he may not be aware that the American forces are being pushed across the board just yet. Plus it does make him and the forces there a bit of a sitting duck for the British then to sort of divert back across the board here. So yeah, another couple of more turns. We're over a quarter of the way through the game at the minute, but we'll do some more turns and see how this, especially this battle here, this is going to be quite decisive, I think. If a green can just hold on to the fort here, then that will be a good sign for the Continental Army. However, if the British are able to take that, then maybe not so much. We'll see. Just played a couple more turns, and I actually misspoke last time because the British could not attack across the water because they did not have control of the water. As soon as I said it, I thought, that's a bit weird, and yeah, I checked and they don't. So they haven't been able to move their ships, their tall ships up the river here. However, what they did instead was divert all their attentions onto Washington and New York, and in a fierce battle, a very fierce battle, were able to push Washington out of New York. And again, as the British player, I could have closed the door on Washington and probably wrapped the game up. And we're about halfway through the game now. But I chose not to. Let Washington escape and see how that narrative can play out. However, there are some casualties. Now, because the British have taken New York here, it means every turn now we're going to lose the Continental Army will lose a New York militia block, which is definitely going to hurt them. I'll have to see, for example, there's a New York one just there. So that is going to hurt. That's going to diminish their forces quite significantly. They still do have the White Plains though, so that's positive. The Continental Army still are sectioned here in Fort Lee. I think what we will do is we're going to bring Washington, move across the map to Fort Washington, and maybe, if we can, get Lee and his forces to join Washington at Fort Washington and have a bit of a last-ditch battle at Fort Washington and see how that plays out, probably between all the forces, and see what impact that can have on this campaign. So again, very few eventful turns. The British were able to push Washington and Greene out of this area here across the water and back to a fortification this side of the river. In addition, Lee has pulled his forces back, and the way that I'm going to play this remaining of the game out is that Lee will pull back to the White Plains, and the British simply do not have the forces required to attack across the river, even when they move their tall ships up the river here. So there'll be a few turns spent for the British to get across the river, across to the land, this side of the map, and then attack Greene and Washington at Fort Lee, and another British force will attack Lee at White Plains, and then we'll call the game done and see how both sides have fared. But it's going to take a little time, a few turns, to get the British up, and the turn track is getting shorter by the turn, obviously, and we'll see how that works out. Now the British are having trouble due to bad weather, whatever reason. They've not been able to move their tall ships. Now they need the ships so they can cross the river here, and they've not been able to do so. However, Clinton and his forces have been able to get here and are looking to make good on an attack on the White Plains. Now the American forces are suffering because they are losing their militia from the New York militia at a rather alarming rate. We do have a few more turns left, so the British need to move across the river and attack and we'll see the outcome of that. And I think that will be the decisive battle. But there's also the battle at White Plains here, which I think could also contribute. The Americans do have retreat paths, so they can retreat either way if they need to. And then obviously the British can as well. So yeah, we'll see. Roll some dice and see what happens. So in the last turn, the Continental Army really showed its teeth and defeated the British at the White Plains. Now, the Americans are just slightly off camera. I do apologise. But they took no casualties, the Americans, and the British took significant and retreated. And the next opportunity, the Americans, if they get to go first, they will chase down and I think defeat Clinton and his British army here. And this side of the board, though, the British have pushed Washington and Green out of the defensive position. They've just moved down the map into the next fortification. The British did take some casualties as a result. So the next couple of turns, what I'm thinking is the British will continue and push on the Continentals that are remaining. But the White Plains here, now the British have lost that, Lee can maybe capitalise on that victory and completely destroy the army. We do have a few turns left, so there's still a little bit to... I've not been keeping track of casualties and etc. I've deliberately not done that. I want to play it out until the end and then see who has, by the rule set anyway, won. At the minute, I feel the Continental Army are winning. I feel the British are getting exasperated with chasing them down, extremely costly as a result. But we'll do a couple more turns. So we finished the game. The British defeated at White Plain. The Americans able just to hold on to their defensive position at the Paulus Hook, which is just the other side of New York City on the map. In terms of victory conditions, in terms of by the rules, a victory to the Continental Army, the British did take New York City, but they were unable to defeat Washington. And from my point of view, they were also unable to take win White Plains. And but in fairness, the Continental Army didn't. They can gain a victory. I mean, they gained a victory because the British didn't. But the British were left with more than 20 pips of health, if that's the right word, left. I think when I added it up quickly in my head. But it doesn't matter, because what is important is that I really enjoyed this campaign this evening. It played fast, as you can tell. It was quite decisive. I did orchestrate certain things a certain way just for the theme of playing this game this evening, I'll be honest with you. There are lots of people that play war games to look for the best strategy, the optimum movement and combat and all that sort of thing. I was playing the opposite of that this evening. I was playing for the theme, playing for the narrative of the campaign, and deliberately, for both sides, I felt, giving them a little bit of a helping hand and making specific choices just for the drama of the campaign, which I enjoy. And for me, that is part of the wargaming hobby, as is, of course, learning the optimum strategy. But that's not what I was doing this evening. So I really enjoyed it. A fun, light-hearted evening. Didn't take it too seriously. Not entirely sure I got every single rule right either, for that matter. It is not a complex game. So you'd think I've got them all right, but it's a war game at the end of the day. But I really enjoyed that. A victory to the Patriots, which is always good. Just deserved, I feel. There are 3 other games in this series, so I may well break one of those out. But I am going through a bit of a American War of Revolution sort of phase at the minute, and a lot of reading. So it's always good to get a war game on the table and just have a good evening of playing these games solo, wargaming evening. That's what it's all about for me as a hobby. I may actually dig out. I've 1776 from Avalon, the old Avalon Hill game for that matter. Haven't done that, any videos of that, I don't think. So who knows? But got quite a few games of this historic period in my collection. So looking forward to getting some more on the table. So thanks a lot for watching. As always, if you have played this game, always interested in the comments of how you found the game, strategies, etc., or just anecdotal stories about you playing the game. Always welcome. Thanks a lot for watching, as always. Thank you.